Welcome to the Sunday Conversation. I'm Alan Masters. I want to talk about today, lust is the counterfeit love. I heard my father say that recently in one of his talks, and you can find those at FHU.com. Lots and lots of them. Also on the Roy Masters and the Foundation's YouTube channels. Lots and lots of my father's talks. As we were sitting here this morning talking about just what's going on in the world around us, somebody was talking about how if you do a certain amount of exercise, that you have a 30% chance of living longer. And then another person commented, and don't eat fast food because it's counterfeit food. And lust is counterfeit love. And this whole world is full of counterfeits. And sometimes we are even counterfeit versions of ourselves and don't even know it. And it's a real sad situation because once again, we are lulled into this state of unconsciousness. So I was thinking this morning, it's the little things in life, the little grains of sand in the hourglass. They aren't boulders, they're grains of sand. And every time one drops through that little hole and it slowly but surely is moving to the other side, someday the tipping point happens. And I absolutely know we have gone past the tipping point in our country. The tipping point has happened, and I want to read something to you. First, we overlook evil. Then we permit evil. Then we legalize evil. Then we promote evil. Then we celebrate evil. Then we persecute those who still call evil evil. Woe unto them who call evil good and good evil. Isaiah 5:20. We have gone past the tipping point. This whole world is so corrupt that in our world, it's good to be evil. I remember when a kid back in 1973, I was in Boston, Massachusetts, and we were playing in a field, and a kid said, "Whoa, that's wicked, man." And I was like, "What do you mean it's wicked?"
Wicked good.
Wicked good.
I'm from Boston.
She's from Boston, she said. That's right. When kids are taught to call something good wicked, then it is already begun. And so this was 1973, almost 50 years ago. So I said last week, I heard myself say it. There was a time when our country had innocence. There was a time, but that time is long since past. And it's happened in our schools. And we, even all of us, have been brought up to believe that evil is good and good is evil. And I heard Jan say last week something about that when you're watching the cartoons on television and you're seeing how the cartoons, the characters are making the parents of the kids seem dumb. Like the parents are dumb, the kids are smart. And what does it do? It reinforces something inside that child to think that the parents are not smart and that they are. That's pride, that's ego. And what does that do? It sets them on a path to evil is good, good is evil. Parents are dumb, I am smart. Parents don't know what they're talking about. They're stupid. God is dumb. All these things to where then they grow up believing these things. They're in the background on that reel that's playing in the background. Good is evil. Evil is good. Parents are dumb. Authority figures are evil. And you know what? The problem is, so now you choose your own authority and you make your own God. And the true one God is the dumb God. So we have been brought up to believe things upside down and backwards. And as the hourglass continues to do its thing, the grains of sand of your life pass through from one side to the other, as you get to this point of your life where you go, gosh, I've been lied to. Because don't we all wake up at some point and say, I've been lied to. This whole life is a fraud. It's a fake. It's counterfeit to what it should be. And then what do? They either have a choice to pick up their Bible. I mean, what else is there unless they hear some rogue voice on the radio like my father, which, many did, or they pick up their Bible and they start searching for answers. But it seems so hopeless, and this is why I believe we have so much suicide in this country. It just seems so hopeless. There's no way back. That's the trick of the devil. That is the biggest trick of the devil, is to take away all your hope. So I have been waking up in my own life, and I hope that you guys are too in your lives. And I'm starting to see the false narrative of that I am Superman. Men especially all believe we're Superman. We, at least we aspire to be like Superman, strong and courageous. And I realize at some point, no, I'm not Superman. I'm nothing. And the reason is I haven't actually added in the one part of the equation that it's impossible to recover from any of this without the Savior. Because it is told to us that none come to God without that relationship first with their Savior. We've been told, though, that Jesus is dumb. The whole thing of Jesus and church, it's all dumb. Why would I do that? Those are stupid people. And then you have to come back to that thing again. Now, I have a young friend who, he said he decided, I'm going to figure out what's going on in this crazy world. And everything kept pointing back to the Bible is telling you the truth. That you can't make this journey without your Savior. You can't go it alone. You can't bypass what God has put into motion. No matter what you do, no matter how strong you think you are, no matter how intellectually brilliant you may think you are, compared to Jesus, we're all nothing. And the pride says, oh yeah? Because that pride is, boy, it's a strong part of us. It's a strong voice inside of us. What I've had to learn how to do is to find humility. And humility is, it's actually a very lonely place because you don't have all those things that make you feel great anymore. You don't have all the things that you distracted yourself from that journey that you're supposed to be taking to your Father in heaven with your navigator leading the way. Does it feel kind of hollow for me in my life? A little bit. But then I look at it, I step back farther and farther away from the old self that I was, and I go, no, it really doesn't. It feels peaceful here. It feels very peaceful because of myself, I know I can do nothing. And whenever it feels kind of hopeless, I just feel it. Because that hopelessness does not come from God. God doesn't give us hopelessness. God brings hope. Jesus is the hope. So I'm having to look at that. Anybody else experiencing that kind of loneliness inside? Yeah, hands go up. She says, I kind of like it. Yeah, it is. It's difficult, but she says it grounds you.
The feeling of hopelessness or the wondering, why am I here? What am I doing? Like pilotless in a sense. You're just sort of lost, but you're there and you're aware you're lost. You're not running to get away from being lost. We don't realize it, but I think it's sort of grinding our true nature. Our spiritual side of us is being formed by the pain of standing in the moment and feeling the helplessness. And you can't stand in the moment, one moment, and feel helpless and think, well, now I've done it. It's all about the next moment and the next moment. And once in a while, you won't be helpless, but it will be a new energy thrown.
And that's why one day when you wake up, you're different and you don't know why. You didn't do anything, but you went through the pain of waiting and just feel the grind.
I think it's grinding your ego down.
So I'll tell you what it feels like to me. I feel like that the lie is so big, and I've been riding this bus for so long with so many of you, that if I just go sit in another chair, I'm still on the same bus. I got to get off the bus. You can't just move to another chair on the same bus because you're on the same journey. You got to get off the bus. That bus is going to the wrong place. I don't want to go there. I want to get off of that bus because the bus driver is the liar.
When I see the president, I'd like to yell out that you're a liar. It's because he's lied so much to us about this, and he's the very top man of the country, and it's such a tragedy the way that our country is headed.
And I know that feeling, and I have felt that feeling, and I look at that feeling. So I hope that you look at that feeling, because even that is a trick and a game to keep you on that same bus, to blame, to be angry and hateful. If the liar can keep you in that state of hate, he's still got you.
I'm reminded that even God used Judas to accomplish his purposes. And so that's what I think of when I think of what's happening in the country, that it's all going to come out in the wash.
The best part about it is that Jesus stayed calm through the whole thing. Because remember, when they came to get him that night, one of the guys got mad and lopped off the ear of one, and Jesus put his ear back on. Peter was the one that got mad, but Jesus put his ear back on. The key to all of this is to stay calm, because you know that all of these things that are happening, as my dad would always say, all things work together for good for those that love the Lord. If you love the Lord, then you know he's got control over really what's going on, and he is using this to separate the wheat from the chaff. And so I want to be the wheat. I don't want to blow away with the wind. And right now, we're all getting the chance to be blown away with the wind by the anger and hatred of watching what's going on with our country, because we aren't able to continue to live the glorious lives that we've lived that have been ego-satisfying, ego-gratifying. And because maybe our lives will change. Maybe we'll have to go into the woods and hide from these evil ones that are coming. And nobody wants to do that. But I tell you what, I buy a nice heavy coat right now because I'll be ready. I want to be the Boy Scout, and an AR-15 maybe.
That statement you made about when you start using a word for something else, George Orwell, freedom is slavery, the truth is a lie. I mean, this guy was so far advanced, and he saw it way ahead before everybody else. Not enough people listen to him, because look where we're at now.
I was listening to one of the conversations my dad did. I don't know, must have been late 70s, early 80s. He was saying that this is going to happen. And it maybe took a little longer than I think that he thought it would. And I'm happy for him that he's looking down from above and not having to experience kind of what we're all going through, because what a mess. We want to yell at our television. We want to yell at each other. We want to yell out the windows. I'm madder than hell and I can't take it anymore, like that movie Network. But the reality is, don't be angry. Don't be mad. Just watch. I have an opportunity in my life to be angry and mad at many things. And every time one comes up, I look at it and say, no, I'm not going to be mad. Because that's the trick. That is the trick. That's the game that the devil wants to play. And it's funny, but I keep coming back to that, not today, Satan. It's funny, and it's kind of gamified it for me, but it kind of works, because I see that this whole life is a gigantic game of how easily we can fall from grace. And the problem is we have so little grace in us to begin with, because we're just such selfish creatures as human beings. So back to the grains of sand. It is the little things in our lives. It really is all these little things when we don't speak up when we should. Because what is behind it is anger, resentment, judgment, and it could be for somebody we love. Our spouse, our children, somebody we love. And we should speak up and say, hey, that's not right. Let's try that again. Let's do this differently, or whatever you might do. But instead, you're afraid that anger may come out, judgment, something mean may be said. And guess what? If you don't speak up on the little things, that's what eventually will happen, is the anger and meanness will come out, because it's like a volcano, and the pressure builds and the pressure builds, and one day it spews out, and then the damage is done. You say something you regret for the rest of your life. You say something that is life-changing to one of your children, to your spouse, to someone you love, a parent, a person on the street, and you go, where did that come from? It is suppressed things you should have said when they were little things. Then they turn into volcanoes of emotion, of resentment, judgment.
I was going to say, you can speak up to people, but people are so hypnotic, in the state of hypnotic, they can't even see it, and they can't understand what you're telling them.
But that's a judgment, because until you say it, you don't know. Anxiety is fear of something that is yet to happen. So what happens is we are judging something that hasn't happened yet. But if you don't say it, you never give them the chance, the grace for God to work, for it to pass from you to them, because maybe, just maybe, they were just being unaware. And if they were just being unaware and you were hating and judging them and you didn't say anything because you thought, well, they're not going to hear a damn thing I say anyway, then you walk away. Guess what? Now, you haven't helped to lighten their life with a light unto their little mistake, and you've walked away with resentment that is only reinforcing and more grains of sand that are tipping that hourglass towards the dark side. And that's what's happening in our world today. You must speak up on the little things, but not with like a force of nature, not a garden hose in the face, not a fire hose in the face. And that's what happens. That's that eruption, is it comes out once we've had enough and we're madder than hell and we can't take it anymore, instead of just speaking up in the moment, simply.
And all they hear is the anger. They don't hear the words behind it.
That's exactly right. Because that fire hose effect of anger, it's such a loud thing. You know, have you ever been shot in the face with a hose? It's kind of painful. And all it is water. And person say, well, that's just water. Well, if you drop out of an airplane and land on the ocean, you'll splat just like it's concrete. And it's just water. There's some physics at work there, if you know what I'm saying. Same thing goes when you offer a correction. If you offer it with a force, that force can turn into concrete instead of water. And then when you hit somebody in the head with that truth, it can hurt. Now, if you do it with love, then there's a chance that it can be accepted. And I want to give that chance. And so I'm trying to learn, and Yoda says, there is no try, there is only do. I think it's just so great because it's so simple. I'm trying. I'm just moving in that direction. And I don't want to I don't want to jinx myself when I say I'm trying, because I am really moving in the direction to being a more loving human being. But I didn't know what love was until I'm getting a glimpse of it now. So now I can move in that direction.
I know with me there was a tendency to not want to speak up sometimes because I didn't want to do it angrily, or I was scared that I was going to do it angrily. So, I would suppress and I became like people pleaser. But I thought if I did it angrily, it would just overtake me and I'd become an angry a-hole. And I didn't want to do that. But I realized even now, sometimes maybe I'll talk to somebody about something and maybe I don't have the right energy, but then I get the opportunity to see that and it can be modified. But if I just keep everything inside, it just, I just became a boiling cauldron and I didn't even know it.
So back to these little things in life. We tend to overlook and say, oh, well, I don't want to be petty, right? There's a million little excuses that goes on inside of our head. I don't want to be petty, it's not a big deal. I told a story the other day with my wife and my son, and I want to tell it again because I think it was such a good one. Because my oldest son, Jason, he is this most loving human being, and he's tended to overlook things. He'll just overlook. It's not a big deal. And I've always admired that sweet nature about him. And so what I don't want to do is be one of those people that just overlooks everything, because sometimes we need to just speak up, even though we may be just loving individuals. I have people here in the audience that have this wonderful, sweet nature, but deep down inside, there's a rage that comes out. We cannot make this mistake. And I'll give you this example. My wife made my son a cup of coffee, and he says, I'd like a little more cream. So she poured just this huge blob of this heavy cream in there, and it was way too much. And I saw how much went in there, and I thought, wow, that's too much. And I thought, how could you possibly drink that? It's like a cup of cream, heavy cream. I go, that's too much. He goes, oh, it's all right, Dad. He goes, I'll just down it. And I said, no, that's not what it's all about. It's just, let's just put some more coffee in it. Maybe let's mix our coffees together, since I had just made mine. And even though we did, it was still too much cream. And I said, let's make another cup and pour it in there and have 3 cups of coffee, because there was so much cream. And he was willing to overlook on the spot, and not a big deal. And I'll just down it, even though it would be far too much cream for anybody to stomach. And I was thinking about it later on. I said, why didn't he just say, oh yeah, that's too much cream? Because he loves his mom so much. He doesn't want to hurt her feelings. He loves his mom. He loves his dad. He loves everybody. He's just a lover. He was born on Valentine's Day. He is a lover. But I thought, that's a little character flaw, because let's just take that and scale it through a lifetime of not speaking up, a lifetime of accepting little mistakes and not saying, oh no, I'd rather have less cream. That's a little too much. And all of a sudden, then you have a person that has never spoken up, and here it starts to build.
When the time is right, you're going to speak up, and the words don't come from you. They just come through you. I think that's what we need to learn, is to, like you said, when to speak up and when it's coming from us and when it's not. And I think if we can learn to let more and more and more of that stuff happen, then we can react like your dad did, I think.
I have learned that if I continue to accept things where I would say to myself, oops, that's just way too much, and then I don't say, oops, that's way too much out loud, then I walk away and I've accepted something that I didn't really care for. You know, a cup of cream with some coffee in it. I wanted a cup of coffee with a little cream in it. So I've then accepted something that would have been an easy fix in the moment, a real easy fix. But there's a little fear of, well, I don't want to disrupt that person's life. A good example is we went to breakfast the other day, my wife and I, and they just didn't cook the vegetables. They didn't cook the vegetables. And here's another perfect example. This is a nice little restaurant right across the street. So my wife didn't want the big, robust breakfast that I got. She wanted a little scramble thing with some vegetables. She says, they just didn't cook the vegetables. And I was like, yeah, well, doggone it. So she kept on picking through and eating, and then she lost her appetite because, guess what? A little frustrated, a little disappointment, right? And then when the waitress came, the waitress says, well, I'll take half off, half of the price of that particular plate, which was kind of odd because the food wasn't properly cooked, and she couldn't even eat. She only ate like 20% of it. So then there was kind of a bad feeling now towards the restaurant and how they even dealt with it. She should have said, you know what, you're right. Because I showed the lady, I said, listen, mine was great, hers wasn't cooked, and the butter smells like the grease pit. So I'm thinking you guys need to check, see if that butter's sour. She should have come back and said, I'm going to take that whole meal off, and you can just pay for just the one. There's always a proper way of doing it. Now, so we got here later, and my wife says to me, I don't ever want to eat there again. You see? And what happens is, if we could have corrected it in the moment, without resentment, hey, these aren't cooked, would you mind making me another one? It used to be I wouldn't complain because we were afraid somebody would spit in the food. It shouldn't be that way. We shouldn't live in fear. But what happens is it turns into resentment, it turns into frustration, all because a little thing we didn't speak up. And the lady did offer to make her another plate of food. But she was now I'm already kind of soured or poisoned from not speaking up. So the same exact principle with the coffee. Speak up. It's not a big deal. The food isn't cooked right. Speak up. It's not a big deal. But it becomes a big deal. It's interesting because the restaurant is a service business. I don't ever want to own a restaurant.
So in that service industry or any other, I guess, business, or I try to give the benefit of the doubt, you never know who's the cook today and how many meals have we had over there that have been amazing. Also, just they're having an off day, the servers just lost their parent last night, or their dog died, I always try to give it the benefit of the doubt, unless it happens more than 3 times. And then I might take it to the bank.
Yeah, it's interesting because we judge the whole restaurant by one person. And I've always said, the slogan of my personal company was, brands you trust, people you love. Because a brand has a certain brand promise, okay? And one person cannot destroy that whole entire brand's promise. That's that one person's situation. I can complain about that one person, and if the brand's promise is true, they'll fix it. And so the restaurant is a good little restaurant. And maybe that cook had a bad day, or maybe that was a new cook, or God knows what, or maybe he thought they were done. Maybe it was an honest mistake. But if we don't speak up, we never know if it's an honest mistake or if it is a reoccurring thing. And obviously, if they cook bad food, they're not going to last very long, are they? The point is, it's the little things, coming back to the little things in life. If we don't speak up on the little things in the moment, those little things turn into much, much bigger things. And the problem is that we are all products of not speaking up in our life when it was a little thing. And now it has become a big thing. And that big thing is living in the cave inside of us because we fed it. That monster in there that kept us from speaking up, the judgment. Because people like to judge. It feels good to judge. It feels good to be in the position of the judge. God doesn't judge us. He allows us to make mistakes over and over and over and over again. He knows it's the process. He is the Almighty. He knows it is the process. And in our lives, there's this amount of time, say 100 years. Actually, I think in the Bible it says 120. So we know that people can live to be 120-ish. We have this amount of time, we think to ourselves, I got plenty of time. Anybody in here ever get to their 30s or 40s and go, I got plenty of time left to fix this person that I've become? And then one day, here we are in our 50s and 60s, and we're like, I don't have that much time. So I'm in my 60s, and I look and I go, well, how much time do I have? And then a little voice says, you're not going to live long. You know? My wife says, was that God's voice? I go, no, that's the dark side. The dark side will tell you everything you don't want to hear.
I think it's not about time, it's about moments when you can turn it around and then you can go forward.
My dad was talking in this talk that I was listening to this morning, and he was talking about how science doesn't quite understand why we die, because this body is self-renewing. Remember, they used to live to be 900, 950 years. But as the human creature has become more and more and more a part of the dark spirit, more and more it has to overcome. And the actual body part is working really on overtime at all times, trying to keep up with our sin, from everything we eat to the way we think to the way we consume evil. And so the body just is like running an engine at high RPMs at all time. It's not going to last as long.
Talking earlier about restaurants, I worked in a pizza parlor for about a year. And in the lunchroom was the dough making machine and the cheese grater. And there was an aluminum paddle that pushed the block of cheese into the grater. Well, there was about a half inch of missing aluminum on it. And I called the manager and I said, what is this? And he looked at it, he says, he wasn't aware of it either. And I was wondering to myself, how many times have people used that thing and not seen it?
So what you're saying is they actually ground aluminum into the food.
Oh, yeah.
As they would push the cheese, the part of it you would put your hand on, so you're not touching the cheese, was like a paddle, and it would push the cheese into the grinder, and then when the cheese was gone, it would grind part of the mechanism into the food. So once again, it's the little things in life.
Over the decades, everyone's been desensitized through the media, and so they're not even thinking anymore. So there's no critical thinking going on. It's like they're walking around like a zombie, and they're just like, oh, believing everything. They are, like your dad would say, hypnotized.
Sadly, the voices we hear on the television have become our conscience. They tell us what to think and tell us what to do, and we obey.
I think what's happened is that there was days where you could trust the press, and then whatever happened, the dark side got in there, and then the trust seeped into the present. You want to believe it. You don't want to believe it. But a lot of the Jewish people didn't want to believe that the Nazis were that cruel. And Schindler's List is a perfect example. No, they're not that bad. Oh, sure they are, but they are that bad.
It's happening in a much more sophisticated way now and a worldwide way, and it's being covered up by Google, et cetera, but it's the same kind of evil.
What's sad is how gullible we are, because when I see something, and I hope that you are all like this, when you see something, your conscience says, don't believe it. But then your pride pokes its head up and says, oh, but you don't want anybody to think that you're different. Go along to get along. So we got to watch that. Your conscience, if you're living in a conscious state, your conscience will be your guide. So back to the hourglass and the little things in life. I think that if we can just not be angry and look at the little things in our life and not overreact to these little thoughts, because what happens is if you look inside your mind when you get an idea of like a couple of things that a couple of people have mentioned, you can either become really intellectual about it and start to dissect it and start to project, and all kinds of ugliness starts spewing out. Or you can keep it simple, stupid, if you know what I mean. So that's the KISS process. Keep it simple. Simply say, hey, these aren't cooked right. Or, hey, there's too much cream, if you don't mind. Most of the time, they're happy to fix it. It's when we don't deal with it right, believe it or not, it has a ripple effect that goes out. And then the person says, well, why didn't you say something before? And there's a perfectly good question. Why didn't we say something before? There is no really good answer.
I know we've said before, John Voight, was pounded on the ground and saying, why does it have to be so hard? I was thinking, in fact, I mentioned to you the other day when I was driving down the freeway, why is it so hard when I'm on the freeway to let that car get ahead of me? It's that pride thing, and it's that, why is it so difficult to be humble?
Because it's supposed to be. That's the part that you left out. John Voight was pounding on the floor, and he says, why does it have to be so difficult? Not hard, because the floor is hard, yes. But he said, why does it have to be so difficult? And then he heard from God, it's supposed to be. And it is supposed to be. The reason is because we are supposed to wake up to this blindness, this hypnotic state that we've been in most of our lives. And as we wake up, we make different choices. I'm that same guy. Nobody can pass me on the freeway. It's a race. As far as I'm concerned, it's always a race. My wife laughs about it if we're in two different cars. It's a race home. And she'll take a different route sometimes. And if she beats me, oh man, I'm not happy. I'll have to sit in my car for a half an hour. But that's just, you know what it is? It's funny, but that's just called immaturity. And as you mature and as you grow in your life, you'll overcome those things with, just without just the wave of a hand. It's no big deal. No big deal to one person is a big deal to another, but to each in their own time and ability. So I don't know. I'm trying to simplify my life in every way, shape, and form. One of the things I'm trying to eliminate is this thing called anger. Because even though you guys would never think I'm an angry person, everybody's got anger. It's just right below the surface with some. If you put people on a lineup, just like they do with the police, and you said, all right, pick out the angry people, you probably couldn't. Now, there's some that wear it outwardly. Their face is just all distorted and don't take it personally, but some of you. But it distorts us after a while. It really does. Have you ever seen an old man with that downturned mouth, and he doesn't have to say a word, you can just see that there's a lot of anger and hate in there. And then you see some old people that they just are old, they've aged, and they're old, and they don't look hateful and angry. And they have a certain peace about them because we have expiration dates on us. We really do. We don't know when that's going to be. For some, it's 100 years old. For some, it's 50 years old. I have a friend whose father died at 62, and I said, wow, from what? And they said, from dementia. He got it at like 57 or 8, and I thought to myself, that's got to be a lot of suppressed anger, a lot of suppression of something that turns poisonous inside. So I am just trying to free myself every day of all these emotions, all the grains of sand, because, have you ever picked up a bag of sand? It's very, very heavy. And we're carrying around a lot of heaviness inside of us. And those little grains of sand all add up to a big pile of heaviness. And so when I had my experience where God put his face right in mine and he said, how do you plead? This to me is what my father told me. He says, just like in Nazi Germany, one day you're living your life and everything is fine, and then the Germans take over and the whole world changes. So he says, one day you will live your life and all of a sudden everything will change. Hasn't it all happened to all of us right now in our world? Everything is changed. Everything, we have to wear masks. We have to get vaccinated. We're no longer free people. Everything has changed. But the part of it that is interesting is the spiritual part. God put his face right in mine and said, how do you plead? And I had that moment of truth where I had to look, and my life flashed before my eyes of all the lies and all the little things and deceptions and anger and judgment and lust and all. I could see it all. I was standing on top of it. I was standing on an ocean of me. And it was like, do I deny all that, or do I just say, how stupid would I be to say anything but I'm guilty? And that's what I said. God said to me, yes, and you have been found guilty of your sins, and now you are forgiven. And it was like I had a big bag of sand on each shoulder, and they just dropped off. The weight dropped off. Now, does that mean I'm saved? No, that means I'm free again to go out into life. God gave me some more years, and go and see what I can do with it. Because I don't carry a lot of self-judgment, self-anger, self-this, self-that. I feel very blessed. And I know, because I dropped those bags of sand, and I know when that heaviness comes back to me in the form of resentment, judgment, contempt, jealousy, whatever you want to say, I don't want to let them back in. So I keep kind of trying to dump it off. It's like, remember Shawshank Redemption? Remember that movie where the guy was in prison and he was digging, and he'd put all the dirt in his pockets, and he'd go out and he'd walk along and he'd kind of let it fall out of the bottom of his pants, and he would just kind of spread it around in the field. That's how I feel like I got to get rid of I have to just let it fall out the bottom of my pants, because I don't want that heaviness ever again. I've been given a chance with God.
You were talking earlier about humility, and that was the moment you could have been prideful or allowed yourself to be humbled. And through humility, that fell away. It wasn't because you dropped it. It was because you accepted the truth instead of being prideful, making excuses. So through humility is where the freedom comes.
And I remember I was willing to accept whatever punishment because it was the moment of truth. And I didn't say that I dropped it. I said it fell away. I felt it be lifted, and I felt like I could float. I felt like I was so light. Have you ever given somebody a piggyback ride, and as soon as they get off, you're like, wow, I can float? Because all of a sudden you're not carrying all that extra weight, if you remember what that felt like.
If you don't have humility, then you're powering the other side. Like you said, the thing gets stronger, the one that you feed.
I will say that I have felt very blessed to have been in that moment of my life where I had to make a decision, and I thought, okay, like my dad said, you never know when it's going to come, when God is going to come or the devil is going to come. You never know, so you better be ready. And I've always said, I stand ready. And boy, I'll tell you what, it was a moment in time for me.
I had an experience like that too, and it reflects back on believing the lie, what you believe in. The experience I had was when I realized that Jesus Christ was not God. And so many people feel that that's what I had been told. And like your dad said, you have two ways of knowing things that people tell you or you understand. When he told me that Jesus wasn't God, he didn't tell just me, he told everybody. I felt that weight lifted off. But I realized that be careful what you believe. And when you believe the lie, sometimes it takes a long time for you to get free from that.
God came to me and did this thing where I got to see my own self and all of what I had made of myself, which was nothing. It was all counterfeit, which is where we started this morning. There was a counterfeit version of me that the world loved. And when I got to see what I was standing on top of, this heap of Alan, it was valueless to me because God knows the real Alan. God knows the real you and you and you. What we think we are is a lie. It's a mirage. It's a counterfeit. When you stand in front of God, then the real you is there. And I was aware, I was made aware, conscious that I was nothing. It was a pretty powerful moment for me. But I also never will doubt again that God is always watching, listening, and there. And right now here. I think it gives me incredible faith to know that. And I don't just think it, I know it. And that's the difference, is that because of that, I feel like it's an impenetrable wall that the devil, I have to open the door to that wall. If I want the devil in, I have to say, come on in. Come on, I'm angry. I'm pissed off. I'm hateful. I'm lustful. I have to invite that guy back in. But I'll always remember for the rest of my life what it felt like to be free from those 2 bags of sin. Of sand, I mean. But they felt like heavy bags of sand. And when that was released, it was like I dropped off that monkey off my back. Like I was saying, the piggyback ride. Wait until you feel how heavy that pig is on your back. It's heavy. And I walk lighter in my life. Even when I was in the hospital, I remember going, why am I here? Why am I here? I've made a mistake. And I thought, well, now I don't want to, I'm here. I'm going to endure. Patient endurance. I made a mistake. I will finish this out and, not take a half a dose of whatever, which could have its own strange effect. I don't know. Again, the intellect tries to do a lot of things. So I now know that I will have more faith moving forward in my life instead of doubting and listening to the scientists, the doctors, or anybody. Faith is something that comes from within, and it is not easily explained. So that's why I think we have these conversations, so that we can kind of try and move us closer in this game of life to what faith is, what love is, what true understanding is, what God is, who Jesus is. All these things, these conversations are really, I think, important for many people.
In the Bible, God says about the yoke is light, but there's more to it.
His yoke is easy and his burden is light. He doesn't want us to carry, he's cast all your cares upon me because he cares for us, and that his yoke is easy and his burden is light.
I've found that in my life that God's message is very easy. It's uncomplicated. We make it complicated. It's very simple. It's light. It's beautiful. It's not only light, it contains light. So it's lightweight, it's bright and light, and it's uplifting. And so whenever we feel downtrodden, that's not from God. God doesn't give you more than you can bear. And the devil does. The devil makes it heavy, heavy, heavy. So if you feel the weight, whether you feel guilty for doing something that you've done, a mistake you've made, something you've done that is wrong, and you feel that it's heavy, it's because you're holding on to it versus letting it go and just saying, you know what, that was a mistake and I repent, I am sorry. And all of a sudden you just feel lighter. The devil wants to he's going to bring it back around again. Here it comes, like the roulette wheel, the ball coming around, and it's going to try and knock you off your where you're standing. But you just have to kind of realize that if it's heavy, it's not from God. Yes?
You said you saw the face of God, I think. And I think I remember reading somewhere in Scripture that says no one's seen the face of God. So I was wondering what your experience was like.
So here's what it was like. This incredible power, and I called it the face of God. But I didn't see a face. There was no mouth and nose and eyes. It wasn't like a face, but it was the power, the strength, the spirit, the presence of God. I didn't doubt that was God. And it's funny because it was so not of this world. It wasn't of this world. So my brain didn't even know how to comprehend anything other than that is God. That answers that. Thank you. And that's actually a good question because that is an absolute fact.
There's a benediction that says, may the face of God shine upon you. And I have seen that. And what I saw, Richard, was a cloud. It was a golden cloud. And I wanted to be there and stay there in that light.
I believe that in our lives, we know the difference between good and evil. Since it's an experience that I can't reproduce in my mind even, if I close my eyes and I go, what was that? Was it a face? No. It was just simply a spirit of goodness that was light, that was energy, that was powerful in a very spiritual, powerful way.
You said that you knew. You had a knowing. You had a metanoia, which is like we know that we know that we know. It's not I think so. But you just knew you were in the presence of God.
Absolutely. I'll never forget that. I'm forever changed for that. I'm very thankful.
I was thinking about something that happens to me, and I'm kind of curious about it. Once in a while, something will happen. I'll get a change of consciousness or my ability to see clearly, and it'll dispel the anger. Like I was resenting my father for a while, and all of a sudden I began to understand my father in a way I hadn't before. And I found that the anger turned to shame because I realized I should love my father. But at the same time, I have other people that I still resent, and I can't necessarily get past it. It's just something, all I can do is acknowledge the fact that it's there. I'm just thinking, is it really within our power to forgive somebody? Not that we have the power to forgive them in terms of how God forgives somebody, but I mean to let go of the hatred.
What I found is if you don't give it energy and just watch it, because it has its own energy, and eventually it will run out of energy if you don't feed it. And so if you have that anger there, just watch it, and it will go away.
I would agree with that, but sometimes it takes a long time for that to dissipate. Because have you ever gotten so mad and so angry at somebody, you can feel the temperature of your body come up, and it comes up from your waist, and it comes up, and your head feels like it's burning, it's on fire. When you have that kind of anger and resentment, it's hard to dissipate it. It takes time.
Patient endurance.
There's a scripture that I'm reminded of, and I personally had to walk through it myself. So you've met Bo. Bo's my second son. I have 3 sons from my first marriage, but I had such anger and resentment toward my ex-husband for a very long time. And there's a verse that says, pray for those who hurt you and bless those who spitefully use you. And I knew that I actively had to do something positive to counteract, because it could consume me. And it was like, I knew it affected other relationships that I had in my life, and I had to forgive him. And I realized that forgiveness is a spiritual principle. It's not about feeling like, okay, now I feel like I can forgive him. I had to. Because what does it say? It says, unforgiveness is a poison that you drink hoping the other person's going to die. They're not affected by it, but you walk around this like unforgiving, and then unforgiveness turns into resentment, that turns into bitterness, turns into hate, and then anger, and it eventually can come to murder, which we can see, in lots of different stories in the Bible. David, for example, I realize that it's just a spiritual principle, and only a person who you forgive actually needed it, right? Even though I know it's the gift that's for me. But he says forgive, and as you forgive, you're going to be forgiven. And so I began to pray for my ex-husband, and then one day, God just showed me a picture of his heart, and it was incredibly isolated and alone. And so it broke my heart for my ex-husband, and ever since then, I have just love for him, and and I just know that forgiveness is a spiritual principle, not a feeling. We will never feel like we want to forgive somebody that wronged us.
I hated my father too, and it took me a long time to see his heart and the anger that he had in there, and to see that other people did wrong to him, and that wrong, he didn't know what to do with it, and it was visited upon me. But he had really very little control over that. And once you see that, then you can start to forgive and let it go. That's, like she said, you don't forgive, that doesn't become an important part of your life, or it doesn't become part of your life. It slowly dissipates, and you're free from it.
And it says the sins of the fathers we passed on from generation to generation. So your father was angry, his father was probably angry, and then he didn't know how to deal with it, and so then it got passed on to you until now you learned what to do with it. And so now it doesn't have to go on to your children and the next generations. Now you can leave a blessing instead of a curse.
Hopefully.
There you go. It's funny, I remember as a kid growing up, since my dad is Roy Masters and you guys all know who he is, there was a side of me that thought my dad was crazy. I never hated him. I just thought he was crazy. So I found friends that would support me in the fact that my dad was crazy. Yeah, and we all do that. And it's the same way as the cartoons that say parents are crazy, you're right, they're wrong. So then you find friends that will say, you're right, they're wrong. And then your relationship grows apart. And then, of course, I've had many arguments with my dad as a young boy and a teenage boy. But I never hated my dad. I just didn't understand his message. And so I thought, well, it's crazy when I was about 15 or 16. Because that's that age where a boy starts to become, he thinks he's a big man, 15 or 16 years old. That's where I had a couple problems with my boys. 15, 16, 17 as they're coming of age. But my dad was always very patient. Like I said, patient endurance. Like God waits for us. We have to wait for our family and our friends and our children. And we have to be patient and endure them hating us, them thinking we're crazy. Even though I thought he was crazy, he knew that he loved me and that I was going to do that. The same way God knows that we are going to rebel against him, and he still loves us and waits for us and does not judge us for that. It's kind of funny because once you embrace the fact that he knows that we're going to go kind of crazy for a big part of our lives, and he's waiting for us to wake up and say, Father, I'm sorry. That's that repentance. I'm sorry I've been such a fool. I repent of my stupidity and my sins. I want to be closer to you. What must I give up to be closer to you? And I'm willing to shed it now. So that's where I am in my life, is I'm willing to give up whatever I got to give up. Most importantly, it's nothing any of you can see. It's all inside this carcass. It's all contained inside of the heart, the mind, the soul. Nobody knows. Nobody. The only difference is you may see me walking a little lighter. You may see a little different twinkle in my eye. And that twinkle isn't me. It's the Father within me. All right. Well, let's just end it with this. Don't let the little things in life take you down, because they will. It is the little things. Thanks for coming. Thanks for your contributions. And we'll see you next week.